guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cheryl and today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. Now during the month of August I read 8 books, most of which came from the library, so I don't have the physical copy to show you. But overall it was a fairly good reading month. Most of the books I read were good, kind of 3 to 4 star books. I read a couple very good 5-star books, and then I also read some books that were not so good. But overall I thought it was a fairly good reading month, especially because school started again for me, so classes picked back up. I've had to do a lot of reading for classes, so not a lot of leisure reading, and despite this, the fact that I was able to finish 8 books, I'm pretty proud of. So yeah, without further ado, I'll go ahead and go in the order I read them this month. So the first book I read this month was Harry Potter and the Cursed Child by J.K. Rowling, Jack Thorne, and John Tiffany. I do have a full review of this book, and I'll link it down in the description below. Overall, I think I initially rated this book a 3.5 to 4 stars. I don't like going back and changing my ratings on Goodreads unless I reread the book, which is good because if I went back I would change it probably to a 2-star book, because the more I think about it, the more it pisses me off. I have a lot of issues that the further and further I get from this book, the more they come to light. But yeah, so I'd be surprised if you don't know what this book is about already, but if you don't know, it's the 8th and final installment, I think, in the Harry Potter series. It's not an actual book, instead it's a script of a play that's bound for us to read, and it follows the next generation of students. So it follows Harry's son and Malfoy's son, who are best friends, and all the shenanigans and weird things they get up to it. So yeah, if you're able to go into it with an open mind, you might enjoy it, but overall I was just very, very disappointed in this book. Alright, so the second book I read in August was Cress by Marissa Meyer. Now this is the 3rd book in the Lunar Chronicles series, so I can't really go into too much detail about this book in particular without spoiling anything. But overall, this book was fantastic. Each book in the series just keeps getting better and better and better, which is good because I didn't really like Cinder that much, which is the first novel in the series. But yeah, this book was just utterly fantastic. I loved it. I loved the direction the story's going. I love the characters. I love how all the stories are starting to intertwine, and I cannot wait to pick up the last book, Winter. So if you don't know, this is a fairy tale retelling sci-fi series. Each book follows a different fairy tale character retold. So the first book is Cinder, and that follows Cinderella. Then you've got Scarlet, which follows Little Red Riding Hood, Cress, which is Rapunzel, and then Winter, which is Snow White. Each book is a very unique interpretation of the original fairy tales, and it's a fantastic, fantastic series that I would highly, highly recommend if you have not already read it. And I did give Cress a full 5 out of 5 stars. So the 3rd book I read in August was Attack of the Fiend, which is the 4th book in the Wardstone Chronicles, or also known as the Last Apprentice series, by Joseph Delaney. Now I slowly but surely have been making my way through this series. It's a pretty long series, and I think about 13 books, but each book just keeps getting better and better, so I kind of want to savor it. I don't want to fly through them because they are fairly easy reads. They're late middle grade, kind of early YA. I know it's kind of the same thing with Harry Potter. As the series progresses, it gets a little more and more mature. Like with Cress, there's not really much I can say about this book in particular without spoiling too much, but basically this entire series is about Tom Ward, who's an apprentice to the local spook. And the spook is a man who gets rid of ghosts, boggarts, and anything that goes bump in the night. A lot of people fear him, so as a result a lot of people fear and are hesitant around Tom. Through the books, he's been learning about different creatures and different ways to banish them, and basically is getting prepared to take over the trade whenever the spook is gone. Now, each book kind of has the thing where it escalates. Each monster escalates a little higher and higher. So the first book, they're just fighting an evil witch who's come back, and this book, they're literally trying to keep the devil from being raised. So yeah, you can see even just in 4 books how much it's escalated, so I'm very curious to see where this series goes. Overall, I gave this book a solid 4 out of 5 stars. So the 4th book I read in August was Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. Now, I was very hesitant when I read this book, or going into this book, because I read Fangirl, also by Rainbow Rowell, probably about a year or so ago, and it was alright. I'm not a huge fan of contemporary, so I didn't find anything really unique about the story. I had some issues with the main characters, so I think I only gave it like a 3 out of 5 stars. And if you don't know, the character in Fangirl writes fanfiction of her favorite series, the Simon Snow series, which is essentially the Harry Potter of that universe. And throughout Fangirl, you can see her write the story. Well, Carry On is the novelization of her fanfiction, so basically it's an extremely meta book, but if you can get past that and get past the fact that it's basically Harry Potter, I really did enjoy the story. I liked Simon as a main character. I liked the fact that he was the chosen one, but he really didn't seem like the chosen one. He couldn't get a harness on his magic. Everything kept messing up. I liked his relationship with Baz and the fact that they started off as enemies and eventually became lovers by the end of the book. But I found their relationship overall to not be really forced, which can happen sometimes in YA books. But yeah, so I was genuinely surprised that I like this book so much. The general plot is that Simon, basically, like Harry Potter, he's the chosen one. He has to save the world, and each year something bad happens. Well, Baz doesn't show up this year, and Baz is his roommate and also is evil, and they hate each other by the beginning of the book. And so Baz doesn't show up, and things start going crazy. So it's basically Simon's adventures throughout the year trying to figure out what's going on, and he learns a lot about himself. And overall it was good. I think the reason I like it so much is because it was fantasy. I like fantasy a lot more than contemporary, and I do like Rainbow Rowell's writing, so I'll probably end up picking up some of her other books. I just don't know if I'll like them quite as much as Carry On. So the fifth book I read in the month of August was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Now, like with Carry On, this book has people divided. A lot of people like it, and a lot of people hate it, and a lot of people are kind of in between. A lot of people said that it was just kind of an average book, nothing very spectacular about it, but I fell in love with this story. It takes place in a fantasy world where there are fae and there are humans. And a long time ago there was a war between the fae and humans. And in order to kind of keep the peace, the humans have kind of been banished to the southern part of the island in which the main character lives. And there's a kind of an invisible barrier, and the rest of the island, or the rest of the huge landmass, is populated by the fae. Well, the problem is humans don't go into the Fae lands and return, and Fae will be hunted when they go to the human lands. And so you have our main character, Feyre. She basically is supporting her family. Her family is very poor, and the only way they have food on the table is if she goes out and hunt. So she goes out to the woods one day and goes and finds and kills a deer, but the deer is about to be attacked by this wolf. And she looks at this wolf, and she knows instinctively that something's not right, and it ends up being a fairy who's shapeshifted into a wolf. But she kills him anyway, and she knows who he is, and she's got such hatred for the Fae, like many other humans do during this time, that she goes ahead and kills him. Well, not too much longer after that, a huge beast appears at her doorstep and demands retribution for what she's done. She's given the choice of either going and living in the Fae lands or dying right then and there. And like I said before, people who go to the Fae lands don't return. And so she ultimately chooses that. So it's kind of a very loose interpretation of Beauty and the Beast. Overall, it was such an enjoyable read. It was slow in the beginning, but I found that once the story picked up, I could not put it down. I flew through this book. I just absolutely love Sarah J. Maas's writing. I'm a huge fan of her Throne of Glass series, and so I don't know why it took me so long to pick up this book, but I highly, highly recommend it, and I will definitely be picking up A Court of Mist and Fury this next month in September. And I gave this book a solid 5 out of 5 stars. So the next book I read in the month of August was The Elite, and this is the second book in the Selection series. I do have a full review of it that I'll link down below. This series takes place in a dystopian kind of future America where the government has long since been disbanded, and now there's a monarchy, and the prince has come of age, and as is tradition, the prince holds this competition called the Selection. And the Selection is basically, you take a group of girls and they compete to become the next queen, and the main character is part of this competition. I enjoyed the first book. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't spectacular, it was kind of average. But I hated the second book. I hated The Elite. I gave it a 1.5 stars, I think. The only reason I didn't give it a lower rating or a 1 star is that it did keep me interested enough to finish it. However, I had so many problems with this book that I'm not even going to bother getting into them here. So if you're interested, I'll link, as I said, I'll link my full review to this book down below. So the 7th book I read this month was 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. And I enjoyed this book a lot more than I expected to. I'm not a huge sci-fi fan, And this is definitely one of like the originals, but the story it told was very interesting. I have not seen the movie yet. I wanted to read the book before I watched the movie, so I didn't really know what to expect going into this. But basically it starts off way in the past with our ancestors in Africa and ends up into the future where space exploration is happening. It's basically just like the expansion of humanity and the universe's reaction to this expansion, and it's just, the ending is quite strange. It threw me for a loop, but overall I did enjoy this book a lot and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So the last book I read in the month of August was Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan, and this is the second book in his Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. Now this book was spectacular. I read the first book probably about half a year ago now, and so I was a little hesitant getting into this book because I was afraid it had been too long. I don't own the first book, so I couldn't reread it or skim it to remember everything, but I found that once I picked this book up, I just fell right back into the world. I fell right back in with the characters, and the general plot of this book was just fantastic. Obviously, because it's the second book in the series, I can't go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil anything. So if you don't already know, this series follows a group of demigods who are basically their children who are, one parent is a human and one parent is one of the original Greek gods. And so they're powerful, and then they go to this camp called Camp Half-Blood to basically learn about how to control their powers, and their powers are based on whoever their father or mother, who the god is. So basically a lot of crazy stuff happens, and if you haven't picked up this series, I would highly recommend it, and I gave this book a full 5 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books I read in the month of August. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these and if they're your favorites, or if you absolutely hated these books. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video.